Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Launch Seminar sponsored by Kitazato Corporation. My name is Miyuki Harada, University of Tokyo. I'm very proud of welcome Dr. Jacques Cohen as a speaker of this session. I don't think he needs any introduction because he has been leading this field such a long time. But briefly, he did his postdoc with Bob Edwards in Cambridge and has been experimental embryologist since 1976, almost 50 years. And he founded so many companies in this field. And now he is currently specialized in artificial intelligence and automation. He's currently a chief science officer of IVF 2.0, as well as Conceivable Life Sciences. So, Jack, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here and talk about a favorite subject, which is artificial intelligence. I'm representing today IVF 2.0, which was a small company formed in Mexico, in the city of Guadalajara, by Alejandro Chavez Badiola, who is a physician very much interested in embryology research. You probably have met him or heard of him. So I will talk about how will artificial intelligence impact assisted reproduction. What influence does it have on the practice? What influence does it have on the professionals involved in assisted reproduction? These are my disclosures, and it's a pleasure to be working here with our strategic partner, Kitazato, and I'm very grateful and honored to be invited to give this presentation on behalf of both Kitazato as well as IVF 2.0. So IVF 2.0 was formed to develop assisted artificial intelligence products, particularly for the IVF laboratory. First, in the first 10 minutes or so, I will talk mostly about generalities on artificial intelligence, and particularly what are the current trends. So we see in artificial intelligence, since about 2018 in our field, it's mostly concerned on embryo selection. Several companies have been formed for that particular purpose. But there's also some emphasis on sperm analysis and treatment optimization. And the leading adoption comes from 3 countries, Israel, China, and the USA. But of course, the interest is worldwide. And the challenges are considerable. There are typical ethical privacy concerns and regulatory hurdles. In the United States, where I live and work, the regulatory hurdles are considerable because until very recently, the FDA, which regulates medicine, the FDA would have difficulties with generative AI that is learning from its own algorithm and learning from experience. That type of AI they had no particular format of regulating that. But that's now moved on, and so hopefully in the next few years we'll see considerable regulation and approval processes for the AIs in IVF. There's, of course, a need for rigorous validation and standardization, and that's particularly important, and I'll come back to that. Then there is the impact on professionals, and since I'm originally an embryologist, talk a little bit about that. AIs are designed to assist. They are not designed to replace embryologists. And even if you were to design them to replace an embryologist, you would not succeed. If you have worked with AIs and helped to develop them, or you are a developer and you are in this room, then you would know the AI is incredibly specific and very narrowly tailored. And if you put it in space, it is in a void. There is nothing around what it is learning to do, what it has learned to do. It's very, very limited. So even if you take 1,000 AIs in our field, if that was possible, and you put those all together and connect them, it would still not cover what embryologists do. But an AI can help you standardize things, and AI can help you give advice. And that's where the concentration is mostly done. It improves consistency, and it reduces, hopefully will reduce workload. And the future outlook for embryologists is it will remain central to integrating AI safety and efficiency. So embryologists will look for safety aspects and consistency. And so on the right here, you see this diagram that you do not have to memorize. It's very small, very difficult to read, but it tells you about each aspect that companies in our field, and there are at least 35 of them, startup companies worldwide that are looking at assisted reproductive technology and AI solutions. And so there are more efforts than 35, because this does not include the academic interests that exist from universities and technical engineering schools. So these are all the applications that have been hinted at in the literature, in the pathway. So there is diagnosis and planning, ovarian stimulation, gamete and embryo selection. And there's a lot of that going on, and most of those companies are focusing on that. Then there's culture and manipulation, embryo transfer AIs, pregnancy and follow-up, laboratory operational efficiency, and finally the future potential of uses of AI in IVF. So there's a lot that has been proposed. But if we focus on the most important or the most critical areas, it's particularly gamete and embryo selection on the top right, and culture and manipulation in the central area. So these startups, normally, if you know about Silicon Valley in California, in a field that we call startups in technology, we refer to as Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley, the success rate of Silicon Valley is not better than 10%. That means you start a company, you get funding by venture capital, and then about 95% of those companies fail. Is that going to be any different here? I would think so. I would think that that is most likely the case. So, in other words, we've never seen this before. We've never seen this kind of interest in our field in new technology before. And this, while in medicine, AI has been going on for at least 10 years. There's many companies that have started and some that have failed. So AI involvement in other areas of the healthcare sector is actually ahead of us. And so here you have already 35 or more companies that are involved. So if we zoom into that big diagram that I showed you just now, it's particularly the one on the left that we're focusing on with IVF 2.0 in our partnership with Kitazato. And there are two AIs that have been cleared for medical use. The first one is SID, which stands for Sperm ID. ID is this. This is an ID, identification. The acronym for that in English is ID, and S stands, of course, for sperm. So Sperm ID became SID. And the second one, actually it was the first one that was developed by us, is called ERICA. I always forget what the acronym stands for. I think E is embryo. But it basically was the name of the first embryologist that applied this in a laboratory in Mexico, and was named after her because she worked very hard to get this done with engineers that were helping her to develop the AI. So those are the two applications that I like to cover. And having said that, and having talked about new technology, what you usually see in new technology is a format that follows a principle that's described as the hype cycle. And in the hype cycle, which was proposed by a company many, many years ago in Connecticut, which advises investors, financial economic investors, to look at certain companies that have just started with new technology. And the hype cycle actually consists of 5 different areas. This is where the technology is triggered, And then in time, you get a peak of inflated expectations that could be months, but it could also be many years. And then you usually get disappointment, and some of those technologies may disappear altogether. And then others, very commonly, will come back in this typical cycle pattern. And they go through disappointment, but the technology changes, or better studies are done, or it's engineered better or more properly, and then you get what is called enlightenment, and finally the plateau of productivity. In the plateau of productivity, the technology becomes ingrained in whatever field it is. And so you put vitrification on this, it follows the hype cycle in its history. You put PGTA on this, it follows the hype cycle too. Only the time is different from technology to technology, but it's usually much longer than we think. And so if we look at AI in general, the hype cycle is there. And the company that came up with the hype cycle is called Gartner. So they are advisors to investment specialists, investors. And if you look at all the different forms of AI, they're listed on the hype cycle. And the three with the red arrows that are the most advanced are computer vision and intelligent applications. Intelligent applications include neural networks, machine learning, all these things that we have been using in medicine and IVF. And computer vision particularly is central to what we do in the IVF lab, where we look at sperm, we look at oocytes, we look at embryos to qualify, to quantify, and to get a prediction based on our observations. So if you think AI is going to disappear from IVF, I think that's unlikely. Given this particular graph, it's very unlikely. So these are the three most advanced areas in artificial intelligence, are exactly the areas that we use to introduce applications in the laboratory. So why is IVF lab so suitable for AI applications? Well, it's a complex environment. There are so many confounders and factors involved. If you want to describe IVF to a third person, that's the first thing you probably say. It's complicated. It requires precision, accuracy, consistency, and it requires that you have optimal outcomes all the time. You track KPIs, key performance indicators, all the time, because you want to have consistency and hopefully improve from time period to time period, from year to year. You want to improve. And that's a particularly good definition to apply AI. So how long does it take? This is the question that I'm asked the most. How long is this going to take? Well, I don't have a really precise answer. But based on the time it took prior technologies, such as IVF, ICSI, vitrification, PGTA, the different culture systems that exist in the lab, all the little point solutions and details that have been added over time, all the aspects of micromanipulation, all the methodology that existed before ICSI to treat male factor infertility. All those hundreds of different aspects and technologies, they took a while. And if you analyze that, it's surprisingly long. If you look at the period between conception of the technology to come up with the idea and then to complete integration. You look at the hype cycle in the beginning of that first dot, where you're in the bottom, and now there's a technology trigger, and you go up. You look at that point in time, which is just the conception of technology, and then you look at the end, where the technology is integrated in the methodology in that particular field. That is at least 37 years. If you look at vitrification, that was proposed in 1984. And it took a long time. And conception of it is actually earlier than that. It goes all the way back to the 1930s. And so it takes a long time to come up with an idea and then make it stick and make it part of the technology, where you don't even know that there actually was a period of time that it had been developed. So it's a long time. So if you look at artificial intelligence in IVF, the first efforts were about 15 years ago, but the first publications are only 7 years ago. So it takes a while, and it will take a while from us to see AI in the IVF lab to become completely integrated. That doesn't mean it's not a successful technology before that. It doesn't mean that thousands of embryologists will not be using it. It likely will, but it's not necessarily integrated in all cultures. So the general takeaways of this AI in IVF laboratory is that it will not replace, but augment embryologists. It will augment, it will improve their work. I think embryologists who are afraid of automation and AI, they underappreciate really what they do or what they are. It's not only what they do and what they have learned over the years. They were born as humans, and we have abilities that no AI can have. Not until this moment. We are gifted with creativity, gifted with intelligence, improvisation, and in the case of embryology, dexterity, which plays a huge role in how good we are. And so you may take the standard operating procedures of a laboratory, those manuals, those the documents an aspiring embryologist needs to read, and you put that all together and you have maybe 2,000 or 3,000 pages. And you can probably teach an AI those pages, or at least some of those pages for each AI individually. But later you can stitch them together, and then you have the SOP. But if we only go by our SOP, we actually miss a lot. For instance, in the case of sperm selection, when you perform ICSI or AFSI, you still need to select the sperm. Actually, there's very little information available in laboratories' SOP journals on that particular process. Most of them don't even cover it, because it's about the logic of selecting the best sperm that you see on the screen. And that logic is simple. Well, it has to go straight and not in circles. It has to move and not be still. And the head is preferably sort of elliptically shaped. And that is about it. But to translate that into AI is not very, very simple. And it's not in the SOPs necessarily. So it's a very complicated thing. But at the end, I think really this is the best time to be an embryologist, because these tools are becoming available. And they are tools that are made for the embryologists, not to automate the lab. If we take all the embryologists away with all the AIs that exist now and all the automation platforms, no IVF procedure would be completed.